Security roles. CRM gives you the ability to create role-based security. The CRM security model protects data integrity and privacy while supporting efficient data access and collaboration. It provides users with access to only the appropriate levels of information that's required for them to do their jobs. You're able to categorize users by role and then restrict access based upon those roles, such as a payroll clerk, or a salesperson, or a marketing team person. We also support data sharing so that users and teams can be granted access to records that they don't own for a specific collaborative effort. We're also able to prevent a user's access to records that a user does not own or share. Role-based security design implications. Security is implemented so that a user must have privileges to something before it to display in their user interface. For instance, if a user has no privileges on an entity, it's hidden. It does not appear in any navigation pane on any CRM form. It's hidden from all views, forms, and exports, advanced finds, and reports. If a user has no access to a function, it's hidden. So for instance, if a user has no ability to export to Excel or mail merge, they won't see the icon for it. If a user does not have other privileges to a record, navigation in menus and ribbons to perform that function will be hidden or disabled. Therefore, if you don't have the delete privilege for a record, the system will hide the delete option from that user. Security roles. Security roles aggregate privileges and access levels required for a particular job function into a role that can be assigned to CRM users. Each role is associated with a set of privileges that determines the user or the team's access to information within the company. Roles can be copied, modified, or created to model the requirements of your business. Users can be assigned more than one security role, and therefore the access rights will be the total of all the rights for all the roles assigned to that user. CRM comes out of the box with 15 predefined roles. The predefined security roles, including access to activity feeds, the CEO, the customer manager, the customer service representative, marketing manager, marketing professionals, sales managers, salespersons, the scheduling manager, a scheduler, a support user, system administrator, system customizer, and the vice president of marketing, the vice president of sales. Privileges define what a user may do. There's over 580 privileges, which are predefined during the setup. The complete list is defined in the Microsoft Dynamics SDK. But privileges are built in, and you can't add to them or take away from them. Each role defines a set of privileges that can be assigned to any user. There's a couple of different kinds of privileges, though. First of all, there's entity-related privileges. So each entity in the system, whether it's custom or out of the box, includes privileges for read, write, update, delete, and so on. But there's also non-entity related privileges, and they define if a user may exercise a specific function or not, such as Word mail merge, exporting to Excel, or even going offline in the Outlook client. Here's a list of the entity-based privileges: create, read, write, delete, append, which means to associate one record with another record, and append to. So you must have the ability to append a record to the record you are trying to attach to a parent record, but you must also have append to access to be able to link a record with that parent record. The assign privilege gives you the ability to transfer record ownership to another user. Share allows you to give access to a record to another user while keeping your own access. And finally, reparent, which is assigning a different parent to an entity record. Access rights determine the extent of a privilege. So the entity access rights determine which records a privilege applies to based upon record ownership and the business unit that the owner is assigned to. So see, we're talking about business units again. This is how it all comes back together. And then there's also non-entity access rights, and that just determines if that particular security role grants a privilege to do something for a user or not. Here's an example of access rights. Organizational level allows the user to perform that privilege to all records within the organization. Parent-child access rights allows the user to access all the records that are owned within the user's business unit, as well as owned by anyone in business units that are subordinate to that user's business unit. Business unit access allows the records that are owned by other users and themselves in the same business unit only. User-level access rights give a user only records to those records they own, or those records that are shared with a team in which the user is a member. And none means no access is allowed. Now, while all of these are used for entity-based privileges, they don't really make sense for non-entity related privileges, such as mail merge or export to access. So typically in those situations, you'll only use none or organization, or yes or no. Using roles, privileges, and access rights. If a user has parent-child account read privilege, this user can read all the accounts in their business unit and all the accounts in any child business unit of the business unit that they reside in. If a user has business unit account read privilege, this user can read all the accounts only in that one business unit, the one that they are a member of. If a user has account read privilege, this user can read only accounts that he or she owns or accounts that are shared with him or her. There's more on this topic in the CRM SDK, how role-based security can be used to control access to entities in Microsoft Dynamics CRM. Here's an example of what a security role looks like. First of all, there's a line of tabs across the top that let you go after certain areas. For instance, core records, marketing records, sales records, service records, business management functions, service management functions, customization, and custom entities. The entity-based privileges are very specific. You'll see that's the list that I read you earlier. Create, read, write, delete, append, append to, assign, and share. And you'll notice that there's lots of full green dots and then some empty circles. Well, if you'll notice at the key down here at the bottom, if it's an empty circle, that means none is selected. If it's a green circle, it means organization. And then this is used to determine parent-child business unit privileges, business unit privileges, and user privileges. You'll notice up here, we have a list of entities coming down the left-hand side and the privileges that you're allowed to have for each entity there in that particular role. At the bottom, we have miscellaneous privileges, which are the on-off only ones. Can you act on behalf of another user? Can you assign a manager for a user? Are you allowed to use the bulk edit function? And so on. Security role customization and creation demonstration. To create security roles, you go to the Settings and Security menu, and then click on Security Roles. In this environment, you'll see there's a lot of security roles that already exist, including the ones that are included out of the box, such as Marketing Manager. Now, there's lots of ways to create a new role, but we'll start off by taking the Marketing Manager role and creating a copy. And you simply open the role within the business unit that you want to open it in. In this case, this is in the Biz IT Pro or root business unit. Select Actions and copy the role. So now we'll create copy. And you'll click to open it when it is copied. So here's the new role, and it left the old row open. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And now we'll take a look at this new role that's been created. It's in the same business unit because, again, you cannot copy roles from one business unit to another, but you can copy inherited roles. We'll take a look at the core records. It includes the account, activity, announcement, and so on. And as you can see, there's a lot of entities associated with this particular tab. We can go on to marketing, and this shows only the entities specific to marketing, sales, and so on. As we discussed before, we've got the privilege and then the scope of the privilege. And the key for the scope of the privilege is down here at the bottom. So I can go ahead and create that role and then modify it. Let's say I want to create this copy where I don't want them to have any access to invoice. Well, I can go and click the boxes until I get them all to be clear. And this will have the effect of hiding the invoice from any users who have only this role called copy. But there's other ways that I can work with these. For instance, I can also just click on the name of the entity and it will advance all of the privileges forward one at a time until I get to organization, and then I can click again and it clears them all for me. So that's much faster. Okay? Now I also want to do that with quote. So I'm going to do the same thing again. So at this point, what I've effectively done for users who only have the security role copy, they will no longer be able to see quotes, orders, and invoices. Now, you can also affect in a column. So I can click on the word assign, and now it will go ahead and change everything in the assign list one by one until I click it down to the fact that click it down to none, so that the user who has the copy role only will not be able to assign any of the records in the sales list. And I'll also get rid of share. So now you've seen how I can change the properties of this role, and I can go through and pretty much select from the different tabs and make whatever changes I need to make. And then finally, I can save and close. Now, you'll notice that I created a copy of an existing role instead of starting from scratch. Well, the reason I did that is that when we start a new role from scratch, like we are here, there are no dots. And it can be very difficult and time-consuming to create a new security role from scratch unless it's very, very specific, like I want to have it give the ability to export to Excel, and no other role has that. Now remember, multiple roles can be assigned to a single user. So if we took away the ability to export to Excel from all the other roles that a user has, and then have one role that's just export to Excel, then we can assign that role and control who is allowed to export to Excel and who is not by just giving them an additional role. Well, it turns out that export to Excel, as well as many other heavy-duty functions, are in the Business Management tab. So we'll go and click on the Business Management tab and roll on down, and here is Export to Excel. I could also turn on Bulk Edit, which allows users to edit more than one record at a time. It's a very powerful function, though, so you might want to set it up with its own role so that it's not granted to everyone. Again, this is all part of a well mapped out strategy, and you do need to map it out first. I'm just showing you how to do it. So now let's go ahead and go back to the details. We want to create the role name as Export to Excel. I'm creating this in the root business unit, which means it'll be inherited into any business unit, and therefore I can assign this role to any user on the system. So now I've gone ahead and created that role. It's been saved, and here it is in the list. Security roles, business units, and inheritance. Security roles are always created within a specific business unit. Users can only be assigned that role if it's in the same business unit that they are. However, business units can inherit copies of the roles from parent business units and even grandparent business units. But the inherited roles cannot be modified or deleted. This can only be done in the original parent role. And whenever changes are made to a parent role, they're immediately applied to all the inherited roles. Users do not even need to sign out and sign back in again because it's checked every time they attempt access. If the role has changed, even though they might have shown a record on the screen one moment ago, that record will go away if they don't have that privilege anymore. The inherited roles can be assigned to users in that business unit. Basically what this means is you can create a role at a parent level, and since you cannot assign that parent role because it's not in the same business unit as the user who is in a child unit, you can assign the inherited role. And also you can make copies of inherited roles so that you can create a new role at any business unit level. But copying a role can only be done within a business unit. So this means you can take an inherited role and make a copy of that to create a new role within a business unit. How to copy a role to a different business unit? Well, as we discussed before, you cannot copy roles from one business unit to another, but there's a couple of tricks that you can use. So here we are in the Biz IT Pros business unit, which is the root. And you see that we have all these roles that are part of the Business IT Pro business unit. What happens if I want to copy one of my roles from the root business unit to service? Well, I can't actually do that, but what I can do is go to service, let it refresh, and then make a copy of the role that I created earlier. So here's the export to Excel role that I created in the root directory. But when I open it up, you'll notice that it says inherited roles cannot be updated or modified. That's how you know that this is an inherited role. So now what I can do is take it and copy that inherited role to create a new role within the business unit. And that's all there is to it. Here's my role. The only function that it has is in business management and the ability to export to Excel. Now, if I wanted to create the role in several children but did not want it in the root business unit, I could initially create the role in the root business unit, make copies of it in the child, and then go back and delete the original role from the root business unit.